Welcome back to the Male Vacancy Project podcast. I'm your host, Amadeus, and I have with me a new friend, Andrew Katz. Andrew is an Army vet. He's a national security professional. He's an Arcterix athlete who is heavily involved in the DC running community. He's an avid high-altitude mountaineer, explorer, and parachute athlete. And most recently, he achieved a lifelong goal of summiting Mount Everest, which is inspired a lot of thoughts and things that we are here to talk about today. Welcome on.
Amadeus, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah. So one of the things, as we were talking about doing this, one of the things that came up that really stuck out to me is you said you saw some beautiful things, which, I mean, you're at the top of the world. I can only imagine how beautiful that was. But you also saw some horrific things. And, you know, I've heard stories about the horrors that happen on the trail to summit Everest. Tell me a little bit more about both.
Absolutely. I'll talk a little bit about the horrors first, just because the beauty that I witnessed and that I experienced really made up for masked and concealed some of the horrors, and really made this a beautiful experience for me. Made this one that, you know, I'm happy to share, I'm proud to share, and honestly, I would encourage others with the same dream to go for it. Mount Everest is a popular dream. It is, the mountain itself is one of the most commonly used metaphors in life for achieving that which is, you know, that your dream on the other side of some obstacle, on the other side of some challenge. And then Mount Everest, of course, being the tallest mountain in the world, is also a frequently used metaphor for, you know, chase your Everest, climb your Everest. With that being said, it has attracted a lot of people. Yeah. There were certainly some people who didn't have the same climbing background that I did. They hadn't gone through the well-worn path of preparation, of progression, to get to the point of being accepted onto a traditional climbing team for the commercial climbing season on Everest. So it created a couple logistical issues, some administrative issues, waiting for people, reallocating resources to help and to compensate for lack of abilities on the mountain. There was a bit of that. Then there's the general over commercialization of Everest. I'm not going to say that it's perfect, but I also won't say that things are as dreary as the media or, you know, as a society thinks about Mount Everest. Oh, a lot of people ask, is it dirty? Oh, did you have to wait in line? Truth is, I didn't have to wait in line, but I'll get to that in a second. And honestly, the cleanup efforts that have taken place over the last half decade really are incredible. The two main spots where people have routinely complained about debris and tents and climbing equipment being left, a lot of it has been cleaned up, has been bundled, and due to recent advancements in helicopter technology, they've hauled a lot of this debris off the mountain, and it really was picturesque. We were in the youngest and highest mountain range, the Himalayas, and we could see for as far as the eye could see, and it was beautiful. So
that's awesome.
There were some darker aspects to Mount Everest, but the beauty was in some of the people that I met, some of the incredible souls who were not only so incredibly strong, but willing to give you the shirt off their back, incredible teammates that were there for me to help us overcome some incredibly unexpected obstacles, which we'll chat about. And really just put humans in one of the most extreme environments on Earth, and really give an opportunity for everyone's true character to come out. And that's what the mountain does. The mountain reveals character. It doesn't necessarily build it, but it certainly reveals it. And I got to witness some of the most incredible acts of humanity on that mountain, many of which I'm thankful for, that helped me achieve this lifelong dream. I would not have been able to do it on my own in the slightest. Not only were we standing on the shoulders of giants who have paved this trail, this path to the top of the world, dating back to the 1922 expeditions, the 1953 successful expedition, but truly the Sherpa community that makes this possible. These families who live amongst the Himalayas on the Nepalese side, who have simply opened up their homes, their shops, their world to climbers, and truly making this possible. Yeah. Without the many people we passed in the villages along the way, from the lowest town where the airport is to the highest town, going from about 9,000 feet up to base camp, which is about 17,000 feet.
Wow.
We really had the opportunity not just to acclimatize and to train our legs, but to connect with the mountain. I mean, I'm so thankful for the kindness, the generosity, but also getting to witness the resilience of these Sherpa communities who have overcome incredible challenges for generations now, living in the high Himalaya, seeing how they run their businesses, seeing how they build their homes, and just continually living to take care of one another. I mean, in their Buddhist tradition, I mean, it is all about wishing goodwill and health and prosperity upon other people. If you've ever seen the Nepalese prayer flags, the red, blue, green, white, and yellow flags that are so traditional in their culture,
yeah,
it's a symbol of wishing someone well. Those flags have emblems, they have prayers, they have messages, wishing and praying for health, wishing and praying for happiness, for growth. And they believe that when the wind blows those flags, those prayers and messages are carried throughout the Himalayas. And I just love that. So by the time I actually made it to base camp with my team, we had walked for 14 days from the beginning to just get to the start line, if you will. I was more than just physically prepared. I was emotionally prepared. I was spiritually, I was culturally prepared because of all the amazing encounters we had with the Sherpa people in those villages that we passed. On top of that, on those 14 days, we walked basically all day, and I really got to know my teammates inside and out. After a few days, everyone let their guard down and really let everyone in, which was beautiful, which isn't always the case in our society. A lot of times I feel, and I know a lot of my friends have felt very pressured to maintain secrecy and maintain privacy and mystique and protect yourself.
Yeah.
I actually think in opening up to some of these people, and I had the privilege of being the youngest person on the team. So I had all these amazing people who had successful careers and families, traveled the world, climbed mountains all over. And I had the privilege of being able to see what made them, what their strengths were, what their weaknesses were. So by the time we got to what's referred to as the upper mountain, everything above base camp, I knew where I could be of help, and I knew who to call upon for help in a multitude of different scenarios. And so that to me was beautiful. That to me was just the epitome of teamwork that I hadn't felt since, that 7-year-old soccer team where I just felt like we were all best friends and just having a blast out there. It was a feeling of teamwork like I've never felt before. And I feel like that's the beauty of Everest. It's the people, it's the community, and it really enshrouds the darkness. It enshrouds some of the negative aspects of climbing Mount Everest. And that's why I would encourage everyone to go for it. Don't let society, don't let the rumor mill keep you from playing the game. Whether it's Everest or if your Everest is something else, and there's a stigma, there's others' perspectives that have tainted the experience, maybe just based on one or maybe just a few. I would encourage you to go for it and find out for yourself. Because if it's your true dream, it's going to have such a monumental impact on you and your future if you go for it. And that's what I found on Everest.
That's awesome. I love what you were talking about the community on multiple levels. One, when I travel, I hate staying in like Americanized hotels and resorts. if I travel to another country, I want to stay in what the locals stay in. I want to eat their food. I want to go to their bodegas. I want to experience the culture. Otherwise, what's the point of traveling? Right?
Exactly.
And so for you to have the opportunity to go into these villages, these towns, which, I'm sure that they've let some Western culture in because
Absolutely.
these towns are on the path to Everest, and so they get a lot of people from Western society coming through it. But to have the opportunity to really experience on the ground level those cultures that are so different from ours in the Western world is just that's so cool.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the concept of traveling and really getting the opportunity to put our safe, homeland away for a second and really get out and learn. And that's the point of travel. I completely agree with you. And that's why that trek, which the Everest Base Camp trek in and of itself is an incredible, physical feat, a challenge that a lot of people pursue. I think something like 1 million, maybe even more, make this trek every year. And
how far is it from the airport?
41 miles in total. You go up about, I think it's 8,000 feet.
Wow.
But you are acclimatizing. So you're actually walking double. You walk about 80 miles because you get to a village. The next day, you'll go for a hike, and then you'll come back and you'll climb high, sleep low, is kind of the mountaineer's adage for proper acclimatization. But in doing so, you get to see even more of these villages. And there's one famous one called Namche, the Namche Bazaar. And, there's definitely some Western impact, but the culture's there and everything is there, and the colors and the monasteries. And, we had the privilege of, along the trek, one of our Sherpa guides had grown up in one of the villages, and he had since moved his family down the mountains and into Kathmandu, but he had grown up with an individual who had, become a monk, was on the religious path. And we get to this monastery, and they explained to us that this was the oldest monastery in the Khumbu Valley. It was a 16th century Buddhist monastery. And we were pretty tired. We were I think we had hit some bad weather on the trek, and morale was dipping a little bit. And this individual ran inside, and I guess he had spoken with the monk, and had said, they're referred to as lamas, these priests in the Buddhist tradition, they're referred to as lamas, and had said, hey, we have a rare opportunity. This is the highest lama in the valley. Essentially like a cardinal is to the Pope, this individual was to the Dalai Lama. The Lama Geshe was his official title. And he welcomed us in and did, even though he was pressed for time and we were pressed for time, we all paused. We went inside, we took our shoes off, we sat down, and he took an opportunity and prayed for us. And he asked the mountain for safe passage, which I learned is a huge part of their tradition of the mountain is not something that we conquer. This was an awesome lesson that I had heard and had, thought about a lot before, but it never really set in until Everest. Is that the mountain is not necessarily something we conquer. Our dreams, we don't conquer them, we experience them. This is experiential learning to the extreme. And he asked for permission for us to climb the mountain, for safe passage, for safe return to our families. And we all got to come forward and kneel right in front of him or right beside him and receive a blessing and a prayer, and
That's
just
so cool.
something like that. And even if you're religious or you're not religious, it was just the having that understanding of the importance of respect in that situation. We were nervous. We were focused on our goal. We were focused on our breathing. We were focused on everything that we needed to survive, but just taking a moment to really respect this individual, their traditions, that was beautiful. That was incredible, and that's where I realized how much the respect not only comes into mountaineering, but just the fundamental impacts of respect having on a community, and realizing the importance as a human, but as a man also.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really heard in your episode with Dan, which was one of the first things I listened to when I got home. He shared it. I was like, this is awesome. I gotta take a listen.
Yeah.
But the fundamental impacts on your respect and the power to build and grow community is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's something that's very central to their tradition, and a beautiful thing that I take away as I continue to involve myself with new communities and hopefully contribute to growing communities as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I love how you tie in that respect piece. And this probably has something to do with why we just clicked immediately. The moment we met, we vibed.
100%.
But like that experience with the Lama Geshe, like that would have been probably for me second to reaching the summit. That would have been the highlight of the trip for me.
Absolutely.
Were I on that, because I love, that is really just, you are engulfed in that culture. And when I was in college, we didn't really talk about this before, but when I was in college, I took a Taoism class, I took a Buddhism class, and I never identified, I grew up Catholic, was confirmed, all of that, but I never really identified with the Western ideas around religion of like, there is a kind of singular higher power type of thing. I really took to a more Eastern philosophy, a more Eastern thought, where like the you can't even really call them gods, but
right.
The things that you worship are nature, right? It's the river, it's the mountain, it's the
mountains are gods.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And they are living, like the mountain is a living being. Everest is still growing, right? We know this. And to bring it back to that respect piece, I think one of the big, having respect for nature is, I think, a huge piece of being a man. Not just in the way that you're talking about, where like you respect this thing that holds your life in its hands when you're up on the mountain. An avalanche could happen at any moment and you're just gone, never heard from again.
Exactly.
Right? You need to respect that. But also bring it down, because respect has to be a two-way street. And by that I mean, you can't respect the mountain without respecting the mouse that is taking a few grains of rice from your tent, right?
Absolutely.
If you're gonna kill the mouse instead of just like letting him go, that's not respect for nature in its totality. That's kind of to me, that's a false respect. It's an ego-based respect, and I don't think that there's any room for that in being a man.
Absolutely.
You need to respect both, or you don't respect either.
You would love it over there. Yeah, you're hitting on a ton of the topics we talked about during those many days of walking. Yeah, and not only respecting the earth, the world, but I think there's a lot to learn to then come back to our communities, come back to cities, and not necessarily like not respecting a building or something, or an office building you pass, but just respecting the way everything fits together, the way the world fits together. There's a process for a reason. I think there's something fundamentally strong and mature about that.
Yeah.
That I've really benefited from my time in the mountains.
Yeah. The other piece about community that you said, you talked about how after a couple of days y'all started to really open up with each other. And I think if you're going to embark on a journey like this, where death could be around any corner, quite literally, you need to know that the people you're with have your back, and they need to know that you have their back. And you can't do that if you've not opened up in that way, which I think is a piece that men in our modern Western society have lost. Yeah. We don't open up, we don't share with each other the deeper thoughts and the deeper things. And I think that's one of the big reasons that male loneliness is an epidemic, as they call it, and growing. I think because men don't share, we don't feel those deeper connections. We don't feel that trust. We don't feel like someone has our back, and we don't feel supported no matter what. And I think that's the root of the male loneliness epidemic.
Like there's strength in vulnerability. I don't think you necessarily get stronger simply by opening up. It's in opening up to someone, a team, a community, and then receiving the benefit of that community, receiving the benefit of them being aware, understanding whether it's in traditional therapy or if it's just one-on-one with a friend. The benefit is, and the strength comes from the help and the growth that comes back from that individual or from that community that has a heightened awareness for where you're at. And I think there's an instant freedom, in my opinion, in vulnerability. But I think the strength is really what reverberates back from who you open up to, from who you declare your challenges, your shortcomings to. I mean, primarily through traditional therapy, it's such a beautiful thing, and it's so important for men now because there's so many distractions. You talk about it a lot on the podcast. There's so many distractions. There's so many people saying this is how it should be. This is how you do it this way. The truth is we really just need to be ourselves because no one else is going to do it for us. We're the only people that can do it, and I've learned that there's so much freedom in opening up, and it's just another way to grow. I do think going into the mountains, I think doing, you made the joke earlier on the show about men would rather do this than go to therapy, and a lot of times I feel guilty because there's often a scene of a guy in a blizzard on a mountain, and it says, men would rather, and there's truth in that, and there are people who retreat into the mountains, and I'd be lying if I said that there isn't therapeutic benefit every single time I go into the mountains. It is a happy place for me. It's a place of growth, but it's more about it's just another way to learn about myself and to grow. But in the same way, opening up and being able to connect with others, being able to connect with people who I admire, who I look up to, who have that maturity that I'm continuously chasing. Those are very, very much complementary forms of growth, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. You said your why for doing Everest was you thought that it would make you a better man, a better friend, a better one day, hopefully, father. What about it made you feel like Everest was the thing that you needed? And do you think you achieved the growth that you were looking for?
More than I was looking for. Yes, you hit it. There's a ton to be learned in the mountains, in austere environments, at extreme altitudes. I wanted to go highlight where I was. I've been climbing for a while, spent some time in the military. I've had some really, really awesome opportunities to grow physically, emotionally, professionally. But in the mountains, as each mountaineering objective leading up to Everest got bigger and bigger and more challenging, I learned how to be a better teammate, how to be a better leader, knowing when to listen, knowing when to step up and make a decision, and so much more. The mountain just presents so many different scenarios that require increased poise and confidence in the face of adversity in order to overcome these things. And these are all attributes that I feel would make me a better friend, would make me a better son, hopefully one day a husband, a father, to be more resilient and then be able to give those skills back without those lessons learned back to others, without someone having to go climb Everest. I feel like it was Everest for me because I was given the tools, and I feel very fortunate to have the physical ability to go, the willpower, the drive to fight through something like that as a mechanism to learn about myself, to then give that back so that other people don't necessarily have to go to Everest, but instead I want people through me to realize that whatever it is that is your Everest, whatever is your Roman Empire, your Holy Grail, for lack of a better term, chase it, because there is growth in that, because it's what you truly desire. I've heard it said time and time again. It's something I truly believe in. The idea you can't go a day without thinking is the one that's going to make all the difference when you act upon it.
Yeah.
And that's always been Everest for me. Since I was a little kid, I saw a picture on a TV of Mount Everest. I learned about the tectonic plates coming together and forming mountain ranges. And I just knew. I didn't know how hard it was at the time, but I was a little kid. I said, I'm going to climb that one day.
Right.
And I saw Everest again on a poster in a doctor's office. And this metaphor just kept coming up in my life. And I always have been fascinated with this mountain. Been fascinated with mountaineering seriously for the better part of a decade now. And to me, it's the pinnacle. Climbing higher and higher involves more and more of yourself and requires more and more of yourself. And I love that concept. And that's why I went through the progression that's outlined, by guides and by professionals, little by little, harder and harder mountains, until, there was no ifs, ands, or buts, that I was ready. And that was this time, that was now. And so that's why it was Everest for me, but it's more than just that specific mountain. It's achieving that personal goal that burns deep down within you, because I realized how much growth there was on that mountain, going through, meeting some of the amazing people, getting to experience the culture, while also really fighting to maintain our health and our strength and our nutrition every single day, to gain purchase, to gain ground on the mountain. It was a continuous battle that required such a wide variety of skills, yes, but more personal experiences, really wrapping 31 years of life, into one massive objective. That's how I felt about it. It wasn't just a race that, I trained for. This is something I've been living for a long time now. And so that's why it was Everest for me, and that's why this was the time to go for it, to chase it.
Love it. We've talked a little bit. I've done some mountaineering myself, did Washington when I was a kid.
You got that on me.
When I was in middle school, did Whitney and Half Dome in 2016 and 2017. And, each mountain is different. Getting a little into the mountaineering side of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But each mountain is different, right? Washington is notorious for its weather.
Worst weather in the country.
Not that it's a particularly high mountain or technically challenging mountain to climb. I mean, I did it when I was 12, but the weather, it was raining so hard, and I was up there with my family. My parents were there. My little sister was there.
That's awesome.
I think she was probably 9 at the time. So it's not very technically challenging, but the weather was so extreme. It was raining so hard at one point that I was with my dad, and my mom and my sister were maybe 20, maybe 25 feet in front of us, and we could barely see them.
Sure. Yeah.
That's
why it's such a challenge.
Yeah.
And it stumps a lot of people. I have not made an attempt yet. I can't wait for the day, but it stumps a lot of people for that reason. And you're absolutely right. Every mountain is so different.
Yeah. But Everest is the big one, right? Do you feel like now that you've climbed Everest that you feel pretty confident about every other mountain in the world? Or are there certain mountains that are like I know Rainier is notoriously challenging. Mm-hmm. Are there certain mountains that you're still like, I'm not sure about that one?
Absolutely. No, Everest is not the hardest mountain to climb in the world.
Really?
Maybe the tallest, but there are a lot of really technical peaks. K2, the second tallest mountain in the world, just for example, one that a lot of people have at least heard of, has a horrific stat about, and I could be off slightly, but I can't be that far. For every 3 that summit, 1 perishes trying.
Holy shit.
And, there's a very low success rate. And there's mountains all over the world. There's a few that still haven't been climbed. There's professionals that are still chasing these unclimbed lines, and every once in a while it comes out, and it's so cool to see. Just because we know the ones that people have been, these pros have been projecting it, as we call. And now there's definitely mountains out there, but climbing Everest, making it to the top, overcoming some of the things that took place, some of the obstacles that we didn't really consider beforehand.
Yeah.
It definitely gives me a confidence, coming back home in so many ways that I didn't have. And I'm really thankful for that. And I hope it's a really healthy, form of confidence.
Yeah.
That's balanced with, humility. I think it's not humility despite confidence, but it's confidence and humility. And I think that's something that has kind of been lost in, the male workspace is just that you don't have to be one or the other. You don't have to be these polar extreme traits. We talk about vulnerability, but we also talk about strength and getting away from the historic, antiquated, male chauvinistic, mildly toxic forms of masculinity. But there's a lot of beauty in having both. That dichotomy between, two ends of the spectrum, and being able to pull the good from both and use them in different scenarios.
Yeah. And
that's what Everest did for me. It forced me to use different skill sets in the multitude of scenarios that we faced. And that's how life is. It's always different. Like the mountain, it's always different. There's always something. Sure, we find our routines and we find our commutes, and we get it down to create ease in our lives, but we don't get to control life. Much like the weather on Mount Washington, things are going to happen, and it's how we react to them that really matters.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. There's a lot there. What you talked about this living both sides of the same coin. As I was starting to get into the work, I was using the healthy masculine, and then as I started to learn more, I stopped saying healthy masculine. I started saying mature masculine, and as I go further now, I'm starting to move away from mature and into integrated masculine, because what I'm realizing in my own self-reflection of my own journey over the last three and a half years is I feel more masculine. I feel like more of a man now than I did 4 years ago. That's awesome. Not in spite of the fact that I accepted and allowed myself to exist in the more what we would call the feminine energy, right? Because we all have both masculine and feminine energy. And it's, the feminine energy of nurturing and of compassion and all of these things, right? Which comes very, very naturally to me. I have accepted and integrated those more considered to be feminine traits into myself. I feel like more of a man now, not in spite of that, but because of that. Ever since I started to really accept that side of me and integrate it, I have felt so much more masculine. I have felt so much more confident in myself. My self-worth has just gone through the roof, and all of these things. And so I think this idea of balancing the two sides is so important.
So important. That's awesome. That's cool that you feel that way. Yeah. I can totally see it.
I went to see you talk at the Arcterix store last week, and one of the things that you talked about was how we need to compete together. There is so much strength in doing the competition together as a team, but to a certain extent, you need to train alone. There's a lot of strength in training for the competition in solitude. That really spoke to me, and I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was fortunate, like you, I was fortunate to really benefit from the fitness community, the run-centric nature of Washington, D.C. There are so many run clubs, so many people desiring to get out there and be fit. And I think it probably stems from the competitive, hardworking nature of this town. A lot of people who care, who really care about so many different things. I think that's what leads to so many people, running and working out across the DMV, and why these cities, DC, Arlington, and all the neighboring cities are constantly rated some of the fittest cities in America. And it's true. And I really benefited from that, and seldom was I running alone. Seldom was I working out alone while I was living here. But eventually I got to the point where I hit a little bit of a plateau. And I looked around, and all of my friends, it seemed like we're training, and they were training hard, but they were training for different events. They were training for marathons, they were training for triathlons, and High Rocks is now super, super popular in this area. People love it. I think it's a much cooler version of CrossFit, in my opinion, much more accessible and welcoming.
Definitely.
And I love that about DC. But I found myself being the only one training for the mountains. And I love this place. My industry is here, but I've always had this dream to climb Everest. And I realized that in order to show up ready, in order to show up and have really earned my spot at the table, and more importantly, my slot on the team, I needed to become self-sufficient. I needed to make sure that I myself was ready to carry the load, to be prepared to carry a teammate, to compensate, to cross-load gear, and really help out in any different, situation or environment that my team endured while we climbed Mount Everest. So I ultimately had to make a selfish decision to leave a ton of friends and family here in the area in order to really focus and do the training that I knew I had to do, which was mountaineering specific. And that involved moving to Colorado. I was super fortunate through work, was able to transfer out to a Denver office that my company had, and used proximity to the mountains to really train. And don't get me wrong, I went hiking a couple times with some friends that were out there, but most of those hours were long hours of solitude. They were hours where I was focused on a very specific progression to get ready to fly to Nepal and to climb Mount Everest. And I realized being a good teammate being a self-sufficient individual makes you a better teammate. There's absolutely something to be said for being an enjoyable teammate, a complimentary teammate, a contributor for sure. But you're contributing your own abilities, you're contributing your gifts, and you have to hone those gifts too. So I realized there's a really healthy balance that I don't think it's too hard to strike that balance, but it's just important to recognize the importance of training alone, of really going into the pain cave, as they say, and saying, this is my goal. And there might be others that are supporting me. There also might be other people that are doubting me, that are hating me. And ultimately, it's on me to be ready. And that was a lot of time training alone. That was long, cold days where the winds would pick up high on the mountains. And sure, I had my satellite phone in emergencies. I never took an unnecessary risk while I was training. But I had to put myself in some situations where I had to make some weather calls. There were a lot of those Colorado 14ers that, those famous mountains that are all above 14,000 feet in Colorado. That was my training ground. And
that's so cool.
I always had a friend that knew where I was. A lot of times I would poke my head into the local search and rescue, introduce myself, drop off a few donuts and say, hey, I'm going up tomorrow. Here's my plan. I hope I don't have to call you. But in the event, if I can provide some added context up front. I took really safe precautions.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when I got up there, it was on me to make the weather call. And multiple times I had to decide to turn around. There was one time I was 150 feet from the summit on Mount Bierstadt, just off the I-70 corridor, maybe an hour and a half from Denver. And I wanted that summit so bad. Famous 14er. I'd climbed it. I had not climbed that one before in the summer. So I was like, oh, this is, another 14er to add to the list. And there were so many different scenarios, whether it was the wind or the snow or the visibility. where I had to really rely on myself, put in my own protection systems, my safety systems, using my own rope, my own, ice screws to lock myself to the mountain when the winds picked up. I had to do that on my own to make sure that when I went to the real challenge, which was Everest, that I was ready. And so I'm really, really thankful for that time. I'm thankful for my time in DC, where it was really community driven, fitness and training. And it was just, constantly in healthy competition with my friends here, primarily through running or going to the gym. But also combine that with the self-sufficiency, the self-confidence, the resilience, and also the skills that I had to develop because I couldn't rely on anyone.
Yeah. I
brought both aspects of training to Mount Everest and ultimately to the top of the world. And I think they're both equally important. One, you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So
there's so much there about this greater conversation around being a man, and to tie it back to what we were saying earlier about respecting the mountain, the Bierstadt, it takes so much humility and respect for the mountain to be able to make that call. A lot of men would have been, I'm only 150 feet away. I'm so close. I can taste it, but they didn't have the respect for the mountain enough, or the humility. They were ego driven of like, I want this summit. And they would push ahead into a space where maybe they wouldn't have survived.
Exactly. Yeah,
so I think that's
being a man is getting home safe.
Yes.
It's not just reaching the summit.
Yeah.
And that was also what you just described. I was also training that for Mount Everest. A lot of people talk about how when you go to Everest, don't plan for it to be your last trip. Prepare mentally for something to go wrong, for the weather to not cooperate, for altitude sickness to set in, any sort of extreme situation. I don't know the numbers on it, but be mentally prepared for it to take more than one attempt on Mount Everest. And that's what I was training in that moment, was the ability to say, being a man is getting home safely. I'm not married, I don't have kids yet, hopefully one day, but getting home to my family.
Yeah.
That's if shit hit the fan on summit night, which it did in some regards, but if it really did, and we were faced with a decision that had a really low chance of success being returning safely, that's not a mature decision in any way, shape, or form. And I think maybe the antiquated, definition of manhood, masculinity would have been, we'll power through. It's just weather, or it's just X, Y, and Z.
For sure.
But that's not the way that we need to show up as an individual, for our teammates, for our families. We need to show up being strong, but also being wise. I think there's a beautiful component of masculinity that is wisdom, that is maturity of thought.
Yes.
And realizing that it's not always brute force that truly defines you or makes you cool or tough.
Yeah.
But making a hard decision makes you tough. And I'm really thankful that was something that I got to really put myself through in a safer environment in Colorado before heading to Nepal.
For sure. The other piece, why I brought up the question initially, of the solitude versus in a team, I think, and you talked about it a lot, of why you decided to go and have the solitude training is, I think one of the big parts about being a man is being self-sufficient. Being self-sufficient, having the humility and the respect is huge for me. Having the confidence to do something, but the humility to know when you can't, and the competence to be able to do it, like to be capable of doing it. And you just hit all four of those in Colorado. And this idea of being self-sufficient, I think this is one of the biggest pieces of being a man, and it ties in all the other things that I just talked about. in being self-sufficient is you need to have the competence to be able to do the thing, whatever that thing is, whether it's finances or climbing a mountain or mowing the lawn or fixing a house, whatever it is. You need to have the competence to be able to do it. You need to have the confidence to know that you can do it. You need to have the humility to know, to be able to look at a situation and goes, today's not the day. And all of those tie into this idea of being a man in this more mature and integrated way, because like you said, the antiquated idea of being a man, what many call today toxic masculinity is maybe they don't have the competence. Instead of confidence and humility, they have arrogance. It's very ego driven, and they're never going to say today's not the day. They're going to say, no, I came here to do this. I don't care what it is. I'm going to do it. And maybe that means that they don't make it home. And that's, like you said, you need to make it home.
Yeah. And you got to know when to employ both sides of the coin.
Definitely.
You're the more masculine, the historically masculine trait versus maybe the historically feminine trait. But they're not masculine and feminine traits. They're just traits that make us kinder people. They make us more effective people, more prepared to contribute to our societies, to our communities, to our family. It's knowing when, having the abilities, and then knowing when to employ them.
Yeah.
Best example, I was a part of a really big running community here in Washington, D.C. It started really small during the pandemic, and then it grew, and before long there were hundreds of people showing up on any given night that the club was hosting a run. And you mentioned earlier about growing up here in proximity to DC. There's more of a tendency to champion to champion women than men sometimes. Just historically, it's been the opposite, and now, like you talked about in podcasts, so many more women are graduating from college. So many more women are stepping up into these really impactful professions, the heal professions that you describe, these forward-facing industries that ultimately make people better, make society better. I noticed when I joined this group, I noticed there was a little bit of, I won't call it toxicity, but I'll call it immaturity on both sides. There were men who were demonstrating immaturity, and it really negatively impacted a lot of people, both men and women in the club. And there were also some women who were really demonstrating, and it always came back to hurt. It always came back to something that people had experienced, whether it was a bad breakup, whether it was something, these are real tough experiences. I've had bad breakups, and you and I have chatted about this.
Yeah.
But I realized that my contribution to that group, and something that, a piece of feedback I routinely got, was that I knew when it was my turn to speak and to be confident to lead, but it was also equally impactful when I elected to be a listener, when I elected to just support from the side. I didn't roll as a man. I didn't roll over and let, people tell me, oh, because you're a man, you need to shut up and you need to, sit and color in the corner. But I also recognized when, if one of my female teammates was up front, was leading, just support them with everything you have. And that there's beauty in that. There's strength in that.
Yeah.
And that built, not only garnered respect, but also just built the connective tissue throughout the club. And that was something that I was really, really proud of, and something I really strive for every day, was to help build that connective tissue throughout this big organization that just continually welcomed new transplants to Washington, D.C. who just wanted to find a safe place to run. That was one of my favorite things. And that's what I feel like was, my contribution during my time before Colorado to the D.C. fitness community, was just making it comfortable for individuals of all types and backgrounds to come and be a part of this. And everyone needs something different, and it's being able to recognize when to employ which skill or attribute, in the right moment, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, and I think that's the humility piece, the stepping back away from the ego. The ego says, I want to lead, no matter what. But the humility is saying, this is not my specialty, but this is her specialty, or this is his or their specialty. So I'm going to let them take the lead right now. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Totally.
So turning it to expectations versus reality, this is something that I think there's a huge piece here on men and masculinity. How were your expectations versus the reality of the mountain? How were those things different? What were some of the hardest things about the mountain, and how did you deal with them, or how did you learn how to deal with them? Because I'm sure you had to learn on the spot.
Yeah, there was a massive gap, a delta between expectation and reality. I did everything in my power, just like you would for any race or for any big event, that you're training for. I did what I was supposed to do. I got a training plan. I stuck to it as best I could, worked on my nutrition, I was climbing 10,000 feet a weekend in Colorado beforehand. And on top of that, I read. I dug into the literature, every book available, written in the past 20 years since the real boom of commercial climbing on Mount Everest. I had read. I'd watched the authors' interviews and even connected with a few individuals who allowed me to interview them, asking about their experiences. I didn't really know a whole lot of people who'd climb Mount Everest. Growing up on the East Coast, we don't really have the biggest mountain ranges.
Right.
So you don't really walk into a bar and meet anyone who's climbed Mount Everest. So I had to really work to kind of network my way and find a few folks who became role models and became really, really awesome supporters, and still keeping in touch to this day. And I was messaging them from my satellite phone on the mountain. So I really thought I had done everything to prepare. I had heard that, it can take more than one chance, but just because of the expense, because of the time investment, the risk investment, I really told myself, I'm going to give it all I have. I'm not going to leave any stones unturned. And I thought that's what I had done. And I thought when I arrived in Nepal, I'd be ready for everything. And I'd know about every possible encounter. And boy, was I wrong. On one of the first days climbing up the mountain, we had made it to base camp. We had done our big train up for all the technical sections on the mountain. We brought a bunch of gear to cache, to bring our gear up the mountain so that we could come back down, acclimatize, and use that gear when it was appropriate and keep moving belongings up the mountain. And we cached our gear and we moved elsewhere on the mountain. And while we were elsewhere, we got a message saying that a windstorm, and we weren't terribly high. We were at Camp 1, and there's 4 camps in between base camp and the summit. They're all roughly 2,000 feet apart. So we weren't terribly high in comparison to other camps and to the summit and to other really treacherous sections. And there was a freak windstorm that came in and blew our tents away. And we were using these communal tents that a lot of climbers would pass through, and they would store their gear temporarily as a means to move their gear higher on the mountain. So we didn't actually set up these tents ourselves, which is another aspect of this story. And so here I am early in the expedition, and the gear that I had not only been collecting over the course of 8 years and saving pennies to be able to afford for nearly a decade was gone. Everything I needed to, summit, but also survive the night at that altitude. So we were left with, not only were we down all our gear, somewhere in the ballpark of $5,000 worth of gear, but we were also without a place to sleep that night. And we had climbed all day. We had been on our feet for probably 12, 13 hours at that point. And the only option was to conduct an emergency evacuation back down to base camp. Helicopters couldn't get up to us, and we would have not survived the night. And I can tell you, this was not, maybe there were stories like this, but losing all of your gear was nowhere in the pamphlet. It was nowhere in the brochure. Yeah. I didn't hear about this from anyone before, and just realized when it's a communal event, climbing, it's a team effort. We're working with this larger outfitter that we all elected to climb with, and there were certain dependencies that you simply couldn't rely upon, one of which being Mother Nature. So it was a combination of the tents not being properly installed, but also, freak winds at roughly 19,000 feet that came in and stole everything and sent our belongings deep down into 400-foot crevasses, never to be found again by mankind.
Wow.
They'll be down there for as long as, the world exists. And we eventually made this harrowing, incredibly dangerous descent through the most treacherous section on the mountain. It's called the Khumbu Icefall, and it's a flowing river of ice. It's a glacier, one of the most famous glaciers in the world, and you are historically to climb at night. You're historically supposed to climb at 1 a.m. That's when we had ascended, when everything is the coldest, when the glacier is moving the least, when the crevasses aren't growing wider, and when the seracs, which are massive blocks of ice, when they're not ready to fall on you after they melt. And we went through at 3 p.m. We were walking through puddles, and the sun was beating down, and you could just hear the crumble of icefall, of rockfall on the valley walls on both sides of us. And we made it down after dark. That day had started early, before the sun had come up. And it was unreal. But then we were still faced with the fact that we didn't have any of our gear.
Yeah.
And it was an entire process that I simply wasn't prepared for, to go on an information campaign, essentially, to communicate with other people who had gear. Our outfitter only had so much and really was only willing to do so much. Their responsibility was to get us up the mountain. It wasn't really an expectation for them that the stuff was going to fly away. Even though, they did have a small part, in it, being responsible for the tents that were installed incorrectly. And ultimately, over the course of 48 hours, numerous business meetings essentially took place in random tents around base camp to collect gear, to communicate with people who had resources. And ultimately, a helicopter was purchased and showed up with thousands of dollars worth of equipment 2 days later.
Wow.
And it was not easy to make that happen. And some feelings had to be hurt, unfortunately, but also, people had to feel like they were heard, and they feel like they had to, get their points across as well. And I was a part of so many intense conversations, and that I didn't train for that. I didn't go to law school in preparation to climb Mount Everest, but that's what it felt like, explaining, as a 31-year-old, sunk a large portion of my net worth and was out there risking, my life. I had quit my job to pursue this dream, and ultimately we were successful in changing some people's minds, changing some people's hearts, and managed to collect every single piece of missing gear in order to continue. Because if we hadn't, the dream would have been over before it even really began.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning of it. I mean, throughout the mountain, unfortunately, we lost a staff member, a really vital staff member, and that really rocked the team. And we had to pick up the slack, and we had to move on, and we had to find ways to continue to move forward. And whether it was the weather, whether it was the mountain, whether it was gravity, I mean, things fall all the time. Things just come loose and fall off and plummet down the mountain. There were difficult things that happened. There were minor muscle contusions. There was frostbite. There was altitude issues. It was just constant. I didn't realize that the challenges would be constant. I figured there would be a couple tough days, couple tough nights, but ultimately we'd find a way to gain, comfortability. We were never really comfortable on Mount Everest. For 60 days, we were uncomfortable. And I realized I just had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think there's a lot more to that. I think there's a lot about life. There's a lot that says about life. That, the dangers of getting comfortable, or the impracticality of expecting to find comfort.
Yeah.
Because this world throws a lot at us, especially right now. There's so many pressures and influences out there that really want to move and shake us. And the truth is, like, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, that's where I want to be. That's where I want to continue to work to be. And I'm really thankful that overcoming, issues like an oxygen hose that accidentally ripped off on the summit. We had just arrived. We were doing a quick reset. I hadn't drank water in 6 hours. And I really just needed to blow my nose, to grab a throat lozenge, to get some water. And in the process, you know, I accidentally, I was trying to help a teammate, but I accidentally ripped off my air hose. And I was at 29,000 feet with no supplemental oxygen. And I had been breathing it all, you know, for about 24 hours at this point. And when you do that, you do become reliant on it. It is very difficult to just cut it off. It would be like if you were scuba diving.
Yeah.
It's very, very similar. And a teammate just rose to the occasion and identified where the spare was, got the spare, came over, figured it out on the spot. Had no training on how to reconnect an air hose.
Nice.
And, you know, he was saying to me, just stay calm, stay still, stay right there. I'm going to fix this. And he did. And, you know, I won't go into gruesome detail, but I was able, unfortunately, but luckily I was able to return the favor for him, you know, later that day. Got sick and ultimately had to be medevaced off the mountain. And getting him down off that mountain became my mission from that point on. You know, he was there. He got me up in so many ways. This was my closest teammate. His name was Wells, incredible human being. And it became my job to make sure, and we moved slowly. He picked up some altitude sickness, also had a really serious bout with pneumonia, and was moving slow on our way down. And everyone beat us back to the safety of Camp 2, which is where we spent the night. And he and I got down after lunch, after dinner. People had already gone to sleep, had beat us by hours.
Yeah.
And getting him down and safely to a spot where we could then, you know, nurse him back to a spot that he was good. And then ultimately we got him on a helicopter, an emergency helicopter the next morning. So
yeah.
It's give and take, and it was just constant. It was realizing that the obstacles and the unexpected was constant. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you bring up the scuba dive because I've also gone diving a couple of times.
Awesome.
And that's, you know, day one when you're in the pool learning how to dive. Rip the oxygen, rip the regulator out of your mouth. All right, your hose is over here. It's going to fall this way. You take your arm, you sweep it around, you grab it, you put it back in. You stay calm.
Exactly.
You know, like that was just like in martial arts. First thing you learn is how to fall, right? Learn how to fail first.
Yes.
And then learn how to be successful. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parallels for getting uncomfortable with scuba diving as well as to mountaineering.
The two sports are inexplicably linked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, I think this whole conversation around expectation versus reality is crucial to the conversation around masculinity and being a mature man, because like you said, we get very comfortable in our modern Western life. It is, I think, over 100 degrees and probably 60% humidity outside right now in DC, right? And we're sitting in an air-conditioned room. But what if the AC cut off, right? How are we going to react to that? The expectation is that we'll continue to have these modern comfortabilities, but when those modern comfortabilities fail, or when you're in an environment where you don't have those, how do you respond? How do you react to the reality of the situation? And I think this is one of the biggest things. In a previous podcast, my friend Alex and I talked about when someone says being a man or man up, they're not referring laterally to like be a man, otherwise you're a woman, right? It's be a man, otherwise you're a boy. It's more vertical.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think one of the biggest things that separates men from boys is the ability to adapt to adversity and take reality as it is and say, this was the expectation. That's not the reality of the situation. One foot in front of the other. Let's go. We're going to figure it out. Versus, I think it's very childish to respond negatively in that situation and to say, well, this is how it was supposed to be, and then just like get mad because there's
nothing you can do.
There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
What do you like?
I love that point about the verticality of the phrase "be a man." That's huge.
Thanks. But yeah, I as you were talking about the reality versus expectation, that's what comes up for me. That's one of the big dividing lines between men and boys.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
So next up, what did the mountain teach you, or what did you learn when you were on the mountain that 31 years of living, being in the Army, being in the Rangers, working in the White House, what did the mountain teach you that these other experiences that many would consider to be like that, like men do that shit, right? What did the mountain teach you that those other experiences did not?
It's not as much a learning point, like something for the first time, but it's the fact that something crystallized for me finally after 31 years. And you just touched on it, and honestly, you were I don't know if I can top the way you described it, but we were talking about the gap between expectation and reality. Expectation, what we prepare for, what we think is going to happen, the comfortable outcome, and the reality of life, which is just what we're dealt with, and the situation we can't change. The biggest takeaway for me from Mount Everest, something that I'd learned in college, I'd learned in the Army, I'd learned, since leaving the Army in my first, civilian corporate opportunity, is that there is serious growth in how we navigate the gap between expectation and reality. It's not just, we need to change the plan and go. That was my mentality that I took away from the Army, was, things will happen, let's be flexible and let's go. But the thing that I take forward with me from Everest that really gets me excited, because it was like a new chain in the armor for me, is recognizing when something pops up, when something happens that's unexpected, when you are faced with an obstacle that seems daunting, that you feel unprepared for, there is massive growth potential in how you respond. First off, that you don't simply react, but that you respond.
Yeah.
That's the first part. And then how you respond is going to make all the difference. Those are the when I look back on the big inflection points of my life, the big low I had in college, where nothing seemed to be going right. It wasn't just the reactions to how things were going and getting through, but it was actually the process of really going through it and going through it the right way, not cutting corners, that decision to do so that's reverberated throughout my life. And so some of the decisions, we made, I could have responded out of anger, out of emotion towards the outfitter, the CEO of this company that we elected to climb with, when our gear had been stolen from us, which was kind of that's kind of how I first felt.
Yeah.
I felt like, we had the day robbed, we had our gear stolen, and progress had been halted of no fault of our own. That was my initial thought process.
I think that's a very natural human response to something like that too.
I was upset, but luckily I'm surrounded by these incredible human beings on this team who really knew me. I really knew them, and they instantly stepped in. And they were like, Andrew, this is how you're not, they didn't tell me what to do, but they said, this is how you're not going to respond. You're not, doing that will only exacerbate the situation. Responding simply because of a change in expectation is simply going to ruin this expedition. But you asked something you mentioned early on about, the best part about meeting the Lama Geshe versus comparing that to the summit.
Yeah.
The real memory, my real highlight from Mount Everest is how we handled adversity, is how we handled the unexpected, largely as a team, largely with both confidence but also humility, the ability to speak but also listen, to be strong but gentle in our approach, strong in why people should support the six of us who lost our gear. I was one of six.
Yeah.
Who lost all this vital equipment, on top of the sheer expense, but just the dream was lost, and that and so many of the other obstacles that we faced that we were not prepared for, that were unexpected, those are the things that I really think are going to translate well and help me out in future situations. That's the payback or the return on investment for me from going to Everest. There's really no return on investment from standing on top, but the growth that I got from going through the unexpected, both as an individual and with my team, that's what's going to pay dividends. That's what when I'm faced with something inevitably, probably in the next week, maybe month, something unexpected is going to happen. Not only pausing and using some of the skills that I've developed in taking a tactical pause and responding versus reacting, but also just the wisdom that there's growth happening. There's something is moving right now.
Yeah.
And it's going to make a difference down the road, whether it's for me or if it's for something I can impart on someone that I care about deeply. That's a win. And realizing the magnitude of that win, that's the biggest lesson learned from Everest. That's what really crystallized for me on the mountain and really put all the previous chapters of my life into perspective. And I think back now to things I endured, in my first 31 years of life that I didn't really reflect on enough. And I'm realizing, wow, like that gave me this, or that's where this comes from.
Yeah.
Something that someone had paid me a compliment for, someone had identified, hey, like that's a great trait. We're not really born inherently with a lot of this stuff. I think there are some kind people that are born inherently kind, but the truth is this is all from experiential learning. And that's what Everest was for me. My chasing this dream, doesn't have to be Everest, but just chasing a big dream ended up becoming the biggest experiential learning opportunity that I could imagine. And then, I mean that from the bottom of my heart, because I genuinely get a little excited. I used to get nervous about, you ever said to yourself, oh, I've been on a streak, something bad has to happen. Like I haven't gotten a parking ticket, or I haven't gotten, something, little things like a financial thing or some sort of, big bad life occurrence. I haven't like lost my phone or my wallet, or like something, karma's about to hit me and kick me in the butt. I almost get a little excited for whatever it is, just because I feel like I have an enhanced ability now to deal with it, and to deal with it in a way that's going to hopefully reverberate throughout the rest of my life.
Yeah. That reminds me of a post that I saw on Instagram recently. I think it was like a college football player or something. I think he was in his senior year, and he was talking about, remember the hard times, because one day you're gonna miss them. Mm-hmm. And what immediately popped into my mind was I rode crew in high school.
Nice.
And some of the most vivid memories that I have from rowing crew were the hardest days out on the river.
Absolutely.
When, we were a mile downstream from the dock. Wind picked up out of nowhere. There was rain. There was whitecaps, which normally, for anyone who doesn't know, rain, you can row in rain. But if there's whitecaps, which is when the water is coming up so much that it's curling over into like miniature waves, right? Whitecaps, absolutely not. You can't.
Water.
You need to get off the water. There are two conditions that you need to get off the water. It's whitecaps and thunder. Mm-hmm. And we're a mile downstream, and we have to row our way back so that we can get off the water. There's no dock down there. Or when we get on the water in the middle of March in DC, and it's 40 degrees outside, but the water is like sub-freezing because it's flowing, so it doesn't freeze, right? And you're out there freezing your butt off when you're not rowing, with the oar coming through here, and you're like huddled up like this, and it's raining, and you're getting splashed with the water. Like those are the moments that I remember the most vividly, and those are the moments that I almost miss, because it was like, damn, I was doing some hard shit that day.
Did like the end of the season, did you guys talk about that? I'm sure that had to have come up, between you and your teammates.
A little bit.
Like in like later seasons.
Yeah, a little bit for sure. Especially that last season.
Your story reminds me of like Remember the Titans. Like
yes.
It's not, even though like you're downstream, you have to get back, right? You're training to row anyway.
Right.
But you just had to get back. It wasn't for time.
Yeah.
It was like
you just
for
had to make
safety.
it back.
We just have to get back.
Without capsizing.
It literally reminds me of, which we all know, like Remember the Titans, just such a phenomenal movie. And great metaphor for life. But some of the training that they did at camp that wasn't necessarily tied to like improving their stroke form or like, to put it in rowing terms.
Right.
But it was just the brutality of it, the sort of get from point A to point B of it.
Yeah.
That ended up making more of a difference than a workout that was like to fine tune your stroke or your sequence or your timing or whatever. I could imagine. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you made it back, how'd you feel when you guys finally made it back? Just
accomplished,
just dead to the
relieved,
world too.
Dead tired. Like those were the days that no one said a word on the bus back to school.
Right.
We're all just like.
But you remember that, not the practice that was like in the sunshine.
Picture perfect.
Yeah.
The only picture perfect day of practice I remember, like really vividly, was like 2. There was one where this happened on the same day. Bald eagle flew over us on the Potomac River. It was really cool. And then we saw a couple get engaged up on the cliffside.
That's awesome.
We had just finished a piece. We saw them get engaged, and we all cheered, and we're like cheering them on.
Love that.
And he turns and he goes, like he gives us a big thumbs up, and we all
energy
erupted
came right back
for sure. And like that had to have just made the moment that much more special for them.
Oh yeah.
And the other day that was like picture perfect that I remember was sunrise, looking up the Lincoln Steps at sunrise from the river. We're looking up from the river up the steps with the Lincoln Memorial right there in the background and the sun rising over it. And the water was like glass. It was beautiful.
I've always wondered what those rowers see. I've never been out. I've been out on a boat. I've never been in a kayak or anything like that. But I always see those rowing teams like working hard in the morning.
Yeah.
Like I wonder what it's like from their perspective. So
I saw them out there this morning when I went to the track for Run Club. I saw them out there on the river as the sun was coming up, and I was like,
you knew it. You're like,
man, I missed it. In that moment, I missed it so much. And
how impactful it is for them. Like, I mean, rowing is just such an awesome sport. I mean, The Boys in the Boat is one of my favorite, all-time favorite books. It's just
so
like,
good.
Kind of like rugby, like just the culture of it seems like it's training for life in so many ways. So I wonder, do you ever look out and think, good for you, guys, girls, whoever's out there, like, you're in the right place. You're exactly where you need to be. You know. I always wanted that.
For sure. Yeah, and talk about expectation versus reality. Anything can happen when you're out on the boat.
Totally.
And you don't have any option.
Yeah.
There's much like you on the mountain when your stuff blew away and you just had to do what you had to do to get back. Kind of the same thing to a lesser extreme, 100%. Right?
But same exact concept.
But same concept. We had to do what we had to do to get back.
Yeah.
Shifting gears, focusing more on the men and masculinity side. We've talked a lot about it already, so if you want to tie in some of the stuff that we've already said, but one thing I like to ask everybody is, what does it mean to you to be a man?
Yeah, we've luckily, and I hope that's just it's natural through like the podcast that you've built up so far, the community that you and people like Dan are building here in the DC areas, that the definition of a man to me, it's moving away from this antiquated idea that these two sort of opposite end of the spectrum traits are one or the other. You talked about the horizontal versus the vertical, axis of man to woman. Instead, it's boy to man. I love that. So I've always heard, growing up, I always heard it's good to be strong yet gentle. And I noticed that word
you heard that
yet.
Growing up?
I heard that growing up.
That's awesome.
But I noticed that the word yet was used as if to say despite.
Okay.
Or in spite of. Meaning that they're different and therefore one is better than the other. To me, it's different. To me, we need to change the word in between to and. And we've talked about it a little bit before. The example of strength and gentility. Both are needed. Both we can provide to the people around us in a specific situation, a specific time that demands that. Being confident, but being humble.
Yeah.
Not confident yet humble, confident and humble. And knowing, really when to employ both, knowing that they're complementary features. I mean, there's so many. Being a good leader and being a good follower. They're not separate. They really are one. And if you bring both, you're prepared for more situations. You're preparing yourself for the unexpected.
Yeah.
I think it's figuring out all those antiquated visions of strength, of manliness, of people who put down others is something you've also talked about in the past. But instead using that strength, using all these attributes to lift others up. That to me is manliness. And that's what Everest gave me the opportunity to really test and see where I'm at as a man, was not pushing someone else down to make it to the top, but realizing that if I lift the person up next to me on my good day, they're going to lift me up on their good day when I'm really struggling. And that's how you're going to make it to the top. Yeah. Unlike a climb that takes a day or maybe takes 2 days, we were on Mount Everest for 60 days. Yeah. And no one makes it to the top alone. And when I finally did, I was greeted by one incredible friend who was just a few minutes ahead of me with this massive hug, and I'll never forget the words he said. He said, "Welcome to the top of the world." And right behind me was a teammate who had been there for me the entire time, and he was kind of struggling. He was getting a little sick. Wells, we chatted about it, and it was my turn to turn around and say and utter those same words to him. And that's why, to me, it's realizing that it's not yet, it's and. It's this and that, knowing when to use it, and realizing that real masculinity, the real definition of man, is definitely not pushing others down, but it's using all these attributes that we've discussed today to lift others up. I don't think there's anything more manly than being involved, being supportive, and being ready to answer the call when needed. And whether the call is for leadership, whether the call is for followership, it's knowing that you're ready for it, that you're self-sufficient enough to be ready for it, but you're also willing to do what the situation requires. And that's preparation for the unanticipated. I mean, we're really, I'm thankful that my definition has really been strewn throughout our conversation today. You know, it's not just kind of like a one-off here. We're going to end with a banger. I'm really thankful that this experience has afforded me the opportunity to really dive deep into this concept that we're talking about today. Yeah. Just with every footstep, with every swing of the ice axe, with every footstep, it was really just a learning opportunity, a massive learning opportunity to grow, but also realize where I'm at as a man, the steps I still need to take, the steps I want to take to continue to grow and to mature and to integrate these concepts like you were talking about. That's my definition.
I love that. No notes.
No notes.
One final question.
Absolutely.
And this ties back to something you were saying earlier, which I, in the moment, forgot. This was the thing that I forgot that you said. But now I remember. You talked about this idea of being an elder. Or maybe you didn't use those words. But
I don't know if I used, but I definitely, I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah. And this is kind of the theme of this podcast, right? Is I'm trying to bring the elders to the forefront, because elderdom is something that we've kind of lost in our society. There's a severe disconnect. There's a severe shortage of elders, of male elders in our society to guide the younger generations. And there's also a severe disconnect between the younger generations and the elders who do exist. And one thing you were saying earlier, I think it was after the first or second question, You said something about taking the wisdom that you learn and giving it to others, giving it to those who are younger, those who are less experienced, and sharing that wisdom, and that this is one of those things that we need to do as a man. And I was listening to a podcast recently where they were saying this is one of the things that men need to do is share wisdom, is share information. There's like an information transfer to the next generations. This is why we don't all need to reinvent the wheel, right? That is technology that has been handed down, and in the same way, we need to hand down wisdom from our learned experience into the younger generations. And that's something that I'm really, really dedicated to with this podcast and with my work in this. So with that, two-part question. First part is, imagine a time in your life when you needed an elder. You needed their wisdom. What was that time? When was that time? And if you met that version of yourself today, what would you share with them? And you can share some background.
Absolutely.
If you'd like.
No, I think I alluded to it, but there was a real low in college. I think I was 20, and I was on a really good trajectory in college to make it to, not only make it to graduation. Went to a military school, was a leader in my class, and I had joined this parachute team, which was lauded as one of the the toughest teams to make, and it afforded me all these cool opportunities. But my priorities were out of line, and I found myself in some trouble in school, which actually threatened my future, my potential to graduate. Ended up being sentenced, if you will, with I wore the scarlet letter, for lack of a better description. It was a big deal in the military. Everyone knows, oh, you got in trouble, you did something wrong, and had to go through this long rehabilitation process, this punitive process, in order to graduate, and ultimately graduated late, actually, from college, and everything seemed to be going wrong. I got the worst speeding ticket it was of my life. I was driving too fast and got a reckless speeding ticket. I was in a van trying to do the right thing. I was trying to drive my teammates down from New York to North Carolina. We had a weird tradition where we liked to, the vans would race each other, and I just wanted to win and get everyone in my van, the opportunity to pick their bunk first. And I should have handed off the wheel. We were supposed to, pass the wheel off to our teammates, and I just took it upon myself and ended up getting a speeding ticket, and a speeding ticket that required me to go to court. I'll say that. Sure. And on top of that, there were some family things that were going wrong. It was just a cacophony of everything is going wrong in my life. And there was, not only was my dad there for me, and really was a soft spot to land. I'm super thankful for that. But there was one or two other individuals that really stepped up and really stepped into my life in a bigger role than they were already there, and passed on some serious elderdom that you just described to me in that moment, to make me realize that it's not the end of the world, that we're going to get through this, and that they also showed me how we're going to get through this, and it was not easy. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of patience. It was late nights, early mornings. It was just a year of my life that I feel like I had to catch up and make up in so many different ways. It ended up becoming one of the most impactful moments of my life. It set the course, the trajectory of my Army career on an absolute, an absolutely amazing path that I could have never seen for myself. That ended up bringing me here to DC to work some amazing roles in the Army that I didn't even know existed when I first graduated from college and became a young officer. But the thing I would tell myself now, if I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self, I would say that this is the beginning of something huge. I would take the lesson we talked about Everest, where, when you face uncertainty, or when you face, the unexpected, it's the wisdom to know that something big is about to happen if you respond effectively. I just when I was 20, I went through the motions. I did what they told me. I went through all the punitive processes. I traveled and made a court date. I paid for my first lawyer to get this speeding ticket reduced. And I, had to do community service as a result of it. And it stunk. And I really just tried to get through it. I tried to rush through it so that I could move on with my life. I would tell, if I could go back and talk to myself, I would say this is the beginning of something massive. I would give myself the perspective that this was a step back for 2, 3, 4, 5 steps forward. And that was impossible for me to see in the moment just because I didn't have some of the fortunate life experiences that I've had over the past decade since. But I would really let myself know, not to change anything, to still, go the course and do what I was told and rectify all the different situations in my life, but to realize that there was going to be a bigger impact of the rectification versus just continuing status quo. If nothing had ever happened, if no woes had ever, befallen my Army and my academy career, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And to just realize that there's gold in that. And maybe that would have brought a little bit of solace, a little bit of calm that I don't think I had in the moment of realizing there's more to this, and I'll one day look back and thank myself for not quitting. Because I thought about it. I definitely thought about it. I thought about giving in to some of the comments that I'd heard, or some of the people who'd, spoken ill of what was going on in my life. There was real gold in staying the course, staying in the game, and realizing not only are you never out of the fight, but being in the fight, it's not just about winning. It's about the journey for life that the fight prepares you for.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Love it. That's such a great piece of wisdom, that keeping perspective and having faith that bad times are going to get better and it's going to serve a higher purpose, and
Exactly.
And it's going to lead to something better down the line.
Absolutely.
Love it. Awesome, man.
Sweet.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough. It's just hearing, the people you've had on, and there's a movement going on clearly, and you seem to be at the center of it, which is awesome. Someone's got to do it, and
Thanks.
It's funny because you've opened up to me about some challenges that you faced, and I feel like that makes it so much easier to come on your podcast and not only just open up about woes and challenges to bring up the past, but to realize that there's other people going through this stuff, and there's men that that need to hear, and also we can learn. There's something to be learned from some of the people in our community that we just got to step into community and involve ourselves and
Definitely
make new friends at 31.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the theme of this year for me. 2025 is
awesome.
Turning out to be a big community building, making lots of new friends year.
Huge.
Yeah. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in. What an incredible conversation with Andrew, and what an incredible experience that must have been being up on Everest. As I said during the interview, I have some experience with mountaineering myself, and I can speak from experience. When you are up on the mountain for several days, you have a lot of time with yourself to just do some self-reflection and reflect on life. And I say that spending a week at a time up in the mountains, I can only imagine how much self-reflection happens in 60 days up on the mountains. And as you can tell, Andrew did a ton of self-reflection up on the mountain and came back with a really unique understanding of himself and of life. And so it was an absolute pleasure having him on the show to have that conversation with me for you guys. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things before we close up. First and foremost, most importantly, if you have not yet, please subscribe to the show on whatever platform you are listening or watching this on, and please write a review. The more subscribers I have and the more reviews I have, the more the algorithm for that particular platform pushes the show out to people who are looking for these conversations. So if you want to support the show, please subscribe if you haven't already. Please write that review, and please send it to a friend or a family member, someone you know who you think might either benefit from this conversation or who might enjoy the conversations. Also, for those of you who don't know, I wrote a chapter in a book. The book I have here on, if you're watching on YouTube, is called Sacred Spaces, Volume 3, Subtle Shifts for Mind, Body, and Home Transformation. It was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. It is available on Amazon. It is also available in some local bookstores. So if you want to shop local, like I always want to shop local, if you want to support local businesses, check with your local bookstore, see if they have it, see if they can get it. Sometimes they don't have it in store, but they do have the ability to get it, so that's an option to get it as well. There was 25 authors that each got roughly 10 pages to write a chapter about an experience they had, what they learned from it, and then provide some helpful information, a practice, some wisdom that they learned from it to help someone who might be going through something similar. And for me, my chapter is about getting out of an abusive relationship that caused me to have an ego death and completely lost touch with who I was. And I had to really build myself back up from the ground up. And it was the worst experience of my life, but honestly, it ended up being the best experience of my life because it led me to become the man that I am today. Without that experience, I don't know if I would be here as the man running this podcast. And for that, I am deeply grateful. So if you're interested in reading more about my story and all the other incredible stories that are in this book, there are 24 other authors that have stories of their own. Go check out this book, Sacred Spaces, Volume 3. And then lastly, I love doing this show. I love having these conversations. It is my passion project. It is my side project. But with that, I don't make any money off of this show. I haven't been able to monetize it yet. Maybe one day, but honestly, I'm really not too worried about that. Monetizing this podcast was never the reason that I started. So if I never make a dime off of this podcast, I honestly don't care. I want to make impact. I want to create impact. I want to send ripples out into the world to help men heal and to help foster these conversations in your day-to-day life. But because I don't make any money off of this show, I got to put food on the table. I got to pay my bills. And in my day job, I'm a personal trainer. I focus on injury management for the athletic population. And I have not had an easy time making a reliable and sustainable living with that. In the fitness profession, it's a very hard profession to create stability and a reliable income in. And so I'm shifting gears a little bit. Last week, I started massage school. So I'm taking all of my knowledge from personal training and injury management and strength and conditioning and all of that. I already have such a great understanding of the human body and how it functions, and I'm going to take all of that and bring it over to massage. And I am enrolled in an intensive course. So normally massage school takes a year or more. This program that I'm in, I'm going to be able to get it done in 6 months. But because it's intensive, it is a lot. And frankly, I don't have time or energy to focus on anything other than massage school and things that make me money. So for now, for the next 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months, the show will be on a bit of a hiatus while I get through massage school and get off the ground with that. I may come out with 1 or 2 episodes in the next 6 months. I may not. There is one event that I'm going to be doing next week, which I plan on miking up with the guy that I'm talking with about community among men. And I plan on miking up and posting that as an episode for the podcast. So I have at least one more episode coming before next spring, next summer, when I'm going to be able to pick this back up. So I'm going to be stepping away for a little bit after that episode comes out so that I can really focus on creating stability for myself and investing in my financial future. So with that, thank you so much for your support. Please do still subscribe to the show and write that review and share any of these conversations with anyone who you know. If you subscribe, you'll be able to get the next episode downloaded right to your device when it comes out, so that you don't really have to pay attention to when I am coming back in a couple of months. You'll just get the episode when it drops. So with that, thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you next time. Amadeus signing off.